right, let's get right to business. I've got less than 20 minutes. All right? So I've got two options. I can show you a bunch of slides, or I can do some live coding. So, yeah? So who wants to see a bunch of slides? Who wants to see me fail? All right, yeah, woo! Let's do it, yeah. All right, so let's talk about the virtual DOM. I'm just going to set the timer because I'm probably going to steal a lot of time from this one. You're going to kill me.
23.
23?
Yeah.
Oh, you're too kind. All right, let's get started. So the goal is to demystify the virtual DOM. I try to go where no man has gone before. Try to do two things simultaneously, like coding and talking. So it's not going to happen, but we're going to give it a try. So what is the virtual DOM? Eventually, the virtual DOM is just a plain JavaScript object. So if I want to, I don't know, to build a user interface or describe a user interface using plain objects, it's probably going to look something like this. I'm going to have some children, and this is going to be another object with a type, and that's probably going to be a title, and more children, this time just hello V DOM or something like this. And let's do something more interesting than just a title. Oh, you're so quiet. Waiting. Waiting, yeah. Let him fail. No, I put this right here. Yeah, I got it. All right. So, ready? This was an amazing live coding of a virtual DOM. Here it is. Thank you very much. Yeah, impressive. No, but basically, this is a virtual DOM. I mean, it's got anything to do with the real DOM, except I've got those strings that suggest that it's going to end up like a real DOM. So let's build a helper function, because describing a user interface using those plain objects, that's a headache, and we don't want to do it. So I'm going to create a function, a helper function. We call this function createElement. It's going to accept a type and unknown amount of children, all right? It's going to be very sophisticated. Ready for this one? I'm going to return a type and array of children. And actually, this tiny helper function is going to save me a lot of code right now. So I'm going to refactor my app. I'm going to use my createElement. I'm going to pass a div as a string. I'm going to nest another createElement right here. I can put hello V DOM. Nest another one. Actually, it's not nesting. It's just going to be the UL right here. And let's nest the last one. Li and item. Good. So I think this version is much better. So I'm going to remove all of this. And just to make sure that we created the same virtual DOM as before, I'm going to log it. So let's see what we got right now. Yep. All right. Cool. So we've got a tiny helper function that's going to help us to build a virtual DOM. Make sense? All right. It's going to end up like this virtual DOM is going to end up in the real DOM. So let's create a function, and we call this function render a node. And this function is going to accept our virtual element that we just created right here, and I'm going to take the type and the children out of it. We can see that in most of the cases I'm passing a string as a type. And the children is like, sometimes it's string, sometimes it's another node. So let's just want to make sure that the type that I'm passing is real string, because what I want to do, I want to create a real DOM element. So create element. Let's put the type right here, and I'm going to return this element. And before I return it, I'm going to loop over the children. So let's do a for each here. And when I look at the children, sometimes it can be just a plain string, and sometimes it can be a node. So I do care about the type. I'm going to take this one here. Let's change it for child. All right. Now, if the child is just another virtual element, I'm going to render it. So here I created a real DOM element. What I'm going to do, I'm going to append the child. I'm going to render the node. Make sense? Cool. But if the child is just a string, you can't just append it to the DOM. So instead of rendering it, I'm going to create a text node. So it's going to be document, create text node, and I think we're done with the render node. All right? Looks good? Simple, straightforward. Let's build a DOM out of plain JavaScript. All right. So let me just fold this. And I want to create just a nice method, public API. Give me a node, give me a real DOM element, and I'm going to do this element, append child. Oh, I'm going to render the node. And that's it. Let's use it right here. Instead of console log my virtual DOM, I'm going to render it. I'm going to render it straight to the document body. All right? Nice. Let's see. All right? So we've got a DOM. Yeah? Nice and easy. No. Don't thank me. Don't thank me. Thank Chrome. I'm kidding. If you get some time to show you some things that you can do with WebStorm that you can't do with Visual Studio Code or whatever the name of this editor. Anyway, so we've got a virtual DOM, and we're able to render it to the DOM. So looking good. And I'm still doing good, which is, yeah. But you're waiting. I know, you've got patience. Next, let's try to do something dynamic, all right? I don't want to just throw a bunch of static objects. Let's do something interesting. Let's create components. Sounds better with this one. Components. All right. I'm going to sketch up how my component class is going to look like. So I'm going to create a class, component. Component is going to be like a JavaScript class. I want to create an object. Let's call this state. And I'm going to implement a method called setState. It's going to get some partial object. And then I'm just going to merge it into my state. This state, partial state. Let's log the new state just to make sure that everything works as expected. The new state is going to be this state. Are we still understanding every line of code? Very basic JavaScript. We're going to do a lot of magic with just plain JavaScript. I hope so. So now that we've got this component class, let's use it. So right here in our app, I'm going to create a list that's going to extend component. So again, I'm going to have a constructor. I have to call the super because my ID is going to shout at me. I'm going to override the state. So I'm going to introduce on my state, let's put a list of items right here. And then let's do something, let's just set interval for now. And every 2 seconds, almost, every 2 seconds, I'm going to call this set state that I inherit from my parent. All right? I'm going to call set state, pass an object. And the item's going to be this state items and a new item. Whoop. Looks familiar? Yeah. Maybe I'm going to push it to production. I think it's going to work out. I think people are going to like this concept. I don't know. Maybe not. But this component class, I mean, we want to return some kind of I don't know, some kind of node, a DOM element out of this one. So I think I'm going to call this method render. And render going to return, basically, I'm going to use this helper function. I'm going to return this, create element, but this time I can loop over my items. Let's fold this, much easier to read. So I can do this state items map and map every item to create element, list, and item. I'm just gonna drop a line here so we can read it. All right? I think that all of us are familiar with this kind of code, so not a big deal. But right now we've got a component. The only thing missing that I want my helper function, my create element, to be able to handle JavaScript classes. So instead of doing this, I'm going to handle the class, which means that we need to refactor our render node function. So let's go back to our amazing library right here. So another look at render node. So if the type is string, no problem, let's create a DOM element. But what happens if the type of our node is not a string, is a JavaScript class? So I'm going to create another condition right here. If, but how do you know if a piece of JavaScript is actually this synthetic class? That's like kind of a question. The person who's going to answer this is going to get a T-shirt. Yeah. Close enough. You want your T-shirt now or later? That's a new one. I give it. Yeah, it's being recorded, so let's keep it for later. That's close enough. But let's do another trick. If you created a base class, I can just put a helper method on it, like component is component true, because you're going to extend this class, so it's going to be much easier for us. And actually, that's not that straightforward to identify if something is a JavaScript class. So, and this piece of code, if you look into React source code, you're going to find the same thing. A helper static method is React element, because look, type is component. And we're done. Plain JavaScript, sophisticated stuff. All right? So, let's create an instance. It's going to be new type. Now that we know that this is a class, it's going to be new type. But the thing that I'm really interested in is not the actual instance, the class. It's going to be the results of the render method, because that's the actual virtual node that we want to deal with. Make sense? I mean, the render method right here is basically the most interesting part. So let's introduce another constant. Let's call it element. And I'm going to call render on this instance, render. Render going to return me a virtual node, just a plain JavaScript object. So I'm going to call render node again. Recursive. Computer science, guys. Yeah. My IDE tell me this is a recursive form, which is great. So I've got an instance. I created my element. I'm going to return this element. But right before I'm returning this element, I'm going to do a nice trick. You've got an instance, and I want to associate this instance with this element. This piece of code is going to run only once, when this function created our tree. All right? So I'm going to do something that might look a little bit strange right now. But on the instance, I'm going to introduce a base element, and it's going to point to the element. Make sense? I mean, even if it doesn't make any sense right now, but still playing JavaScript? Are we good? Nice. Let's see if it's working. So I'm going to refresh, and everything seems to work. Yeah, it's better than doing unit testing. Just if you don't have any errors, we're fine. Push to production. Yeah. This is professional. All right, and I can see this console log every 2 seconds, which means that we are successfully inherit from our base class, which means that this set state right here is being called, and we console log the new state. Good. Which brings us to the last part of this amazing journey. When you as a developer use my library and call set state, like you're doing right here, behind the scenes, under the hood, and other buzzwords that sell workshops, I want to re-render my component. All right? So let's see how it can be done. First, let's clean up the screen a little bit. All right. So right here, when you call set state, I'm going to merge the state and call a function called update component, passing myself. Let's implement this. So remember that we cached this element on the component. When the first time that we created the instance, we called the render method, and we just saved the reference to this real DOM element. So I can take the old element straight from my instance. Component base element, probably going to be the old element, the element that we cached. We're going to walk through this code when I'm finished, so don't worry. And if I want to know what's my current state, I can, let's call this new element, and I can just call component render, which means let's log them. Old element and new element, which means that every time that you call set state, I'm merging this state object, I'm calling this function update component, I'm checking the cached element that I saved when it was created, and then I'm calling render again. So if we look at the logs now, we've got a real DOM element and a virtual DOM element. So that's not the funny part yet. There is some later, but keep on. All right, so now we can compare them, which lead us to our final function. What I really want to do now, I want to update my component base element, this element that associates with this class, with this instance. But I want to figure out what's the difference between my old element, which is a DOM element, a real DOM element, and my new element, which is a plain JavaScript object, or a virtual DOM. So let's create a diff. All right? Try to do this with VS Code. You can't. Maybe you can. I don't know. I don't use this. Now the diff function, that's the most important part of this library. All right? Here you're going to put all of your computer science knowledge. You're gonna find out how you can compare efficiently between two objects, and you can optimize it again and again and again, because eventually you need to return an element out of this. Now, we're not going to spend too much time in trying to compare now, every piece of code. But just for the example, let's say that we care currently only about if you got new children. So I'm going to create has new children variable. Let's check the old element, which is a DOM element. So I'm going to compare the child node's length. And if it's not equals to the new element, which is it's our virtual DOM, children length. So for this example, we're going to assume that we've got a new child. Make sense? If you want to take this example a step further, you're going to compare everything. You can compare the type, the children, if it's like a new child, if you just subscribe, whatever, all right? If we've got new children, I'm going to take this old element, the same one. I'm going to append the child. I'm going to render a new virtual node, but I don't want to render the entire array of children. I just want to take the new one, the last one. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say render node, going to be, let's take the new element children, but just the last one. Length, -1. Make sense? Kind of? Not the most beautiful JavaScript, I know, but I'm just trying to keep it, I'm not trying to be sophisticated and like writing some, you know. All right, let's see what we got. So I'm going to refresh. We get new items. Almost. Cannot reach child node property because I'm returning undefined here. So my diff, remember when you update the component, you want to update the base element associated with its instance with a new element. So the diff must return an element, which makes sense. So let's return the old node. Back here, let's see what we've got. So it seems to be working, but I want to make sure that I'm actually using the concept of virtual DOM, like this diffing. So first I'm going to check elements. So I can see that I'm just rendering a new DOM element each and every time. But I want to make sure even more. No, that's not the truth. I just want to show off about something new that I learned about from DevTools. So I'm going to use paint flashing, which is very advanced. And paint flashing going to highlight the area of the page that needs to be repainted. So it's another proof that our tiny virtual DOM is actually kind of efficient. Because otherwise, we're going to see like rendering the entire tree. So first, I didn't fail. Yeah. Second, I still got 4 minutes. So let's summarize. Let's go through the code. And then I might introduce myself or something like this. All right. We usually do it in conferences. All right. So this syntax is pretty much straightforward, familiar. I don't need to walk through it. Make sense? All of us are React developers, so kind of. All right. Nice. So the whole thing was about, let's start by creating a helper function that helps us build a nested tree of objects, which was this create element. Not too sophisticated, just a helper function. Another separated function called render node is responsible for taking a plain JavaScript tree of objects and create a real DOM elements. And the magic happens when you just inherit a class, a pre-made class called component, and every time you call set state, behind the scenes I'm calling update components. All right? You're not clapping because I didn't fail? I'm just checking. All right. So, all right. That takeaway, there is no magic in code. There is no magic in code. All right? Another takeaway, a virtual DOM is just a plain JavaScript object. Another takeaway, this dude at the mall is not a real Santa. Watch your kids. All right? No, I'm not kidding. It's Luca. Trust me. All right. But the real message from this short session was don't just execute code. All right? Try to implement stuff by yourself. It might seem sophisticated, but if you look into React source code, you see those basics right there. All right? And we use just plain JavaScript. Nothing fancy. Or anything fancy, or whatever you say it in English in the right way. This is a bad picture of me. I'm a front-end developer at a company called 500 Tech. This is my Twitter handle, all right? At 500 Tech, we sit in New York City. We help companies to build front ends. So check out our website. We've got some really cool use cases and some great articles. I'm also a professional dancer. I'm a semi-professional violin player, a painter, and a paint on my free time. But seriously, if you're visiting New York City, come and check out our ReactNYC meetup, and you can meet my alter ego, Sergeant JSX. You can check out YouTube for some stuff with this dude. All right? If you got lucky, he will throw a hand grenade on you during his talk. Take a photo of this one. I still got 1 minute, don't worry. Take a photo of this one. This is my latest book, which you can get for free using this link. I'm going to wait for a second. Don't get too excited. It just costs $5, but what when you write books, you know. All right? But most important, for every book you downloaded for free, if you don't get it, don't worry. Catch me during the break. For each book that you download for free, I'm going to donate $5 to APHD, which is a very important organization. Who's familiar with this one? Anonymous PHP Developers, where we help people that still use PHP. Guys, this is a serious thing, all right? We actually teach them JavaScript. We help them get a job and do something. Anyway, I didn't have too much time, so let's cut it. I haven't talked about props. I haven't talked about events. I haven't talked about great hair care tips, because I'm much older than it looks like, and my hair is still shiny. So if you want to know my secrets, you can join me for a beer. This is my new project, which basically means buy me a beer, and I tell you everything you want to know. And some stuff you might don't want to know. Anyway, thank you very much. This is my email, my Twitter handle. I'm going to hand it back to you.
Good job, Tom.